So what you're doing, in effect, is putting the judge in the same position as Pontius Pilate. You know, I don't want to kill the guy because he's not guilty, but on the other hand, if I don't give him to the people, it won't look good to Caesar and I won't get a promotion next year. I may not get a merit raise. You know, Pilate was a good bureaucrat. And so some of our judges are good bureaucrats. But some of our judges also know and understand constitutional law. And if enough of us, and I'm not saying thousands of us, I said enough, 10, 15 people. You know, it only requires about 10 or 15 people, to my estimation, maybe 30 at the most. Good, competent pro se's operating in any county, going into those courts regularly. I mean, once a year out of the 15 or 30 that you've got. And there's 15 to 30 lawsuits a year, 15 to 30 constitutional questions a year. Pretty soon, the lower courts will have to start making those decisions pursuant to the Marbury Doctrine, because if they don't, it floods the higher courts, and pretty soon the state Supreme Court says, "What's the matter with you dummies over there? Can't you make decisions?" Now, that hasn't been done in America for 75 years. Citizens have not been taking their issues to court, and it's time that they started doing that again. And that's why here in Ada County, I just got word in the newspaper the other day that they're going to have to hire some new judges here to hear all these appeals that are coming around. Gosh, I wonder where all these appeals are coming from. I'll tell you where all the appeals are coming from. They're coming from citizens, people just like me and people just like you. And you know, every appeal that goes in there, they're sitting there, "Oh, we'll just dispense of this housewife from Cuna. Why, she's dumb. She can't chew gum." And pretty soon you get this housewife from Cuna walking in there with good paper. We've got a housewife that can chew gum and talk at the same time, Judge. And I want my issues listened to. And all of a sudden, oops, gosh, now I've got to listen to this woman. And whether he's an unjust judge or not, he's sitting there saying, I've got to listen to this case. And the reason that the lower courts will be compelled to listen and make these decisions at the lower level on constitutional grounds is because the higher courts, remember, have less and less available resources to do it. Now watch this scenario. In Ada County, there are about 3 magistrate traffic court judges and I think 7 magistrates, which makes a total of 10 magistrates' courts that could have ruled on, let's say, this motion for a writ of habeas corpus. Let's take another one. A motion to produce a transcript of the hearing under Rule 5.2. 10 of those judges in 10 separate courts are making those types of decisions, and it could easily be decided right there. They will typically, because of the costs involved, say, no, we're not going to do that. If you want it, pay for it. All right. So the case is completed, and we take it to the district court. Now, in the district court, I think there are 6 district court judges, maybe as little as 5, about half as many. All right? So there's half as many courts, then, to listen to this issue of motion to produce transcript of the hearing. All right? Let's suppose that that district court judge says, yeah, I agree, I'm not going to listen to it either, Gordon. Now I take the issue up to the appeals court. There's only one of those in Idaho, a 3-panel judge, which was designed to take the load off of our state Supreme Court. Let's say that they look at it. Well, there's only one of those courts, and if they don't listen to me there, I'll take it to my state Supreme Court. So do you notice what happens? You have 1,000 people going into the magistrates' courts. Okay, out of those 1,000, they weed out all the cases but 50, and those 50 cases are appealed to the district court. The district court weeds out 40 of those, and only 10 cases are left to go to the appeals court. The appeals court can get rid of 8 of those, and only 2 merit going to the state Supreme Court. Of those 2, only 1 of those would warrant then going on to San Francisco, to the circuit court, or to the Supreme Court of the United States. Watch what happens when you get 30 pro se's operating, or 15 in the county. Whatever the normal load is, it suddenly skyrockets, because all 15 of those pro se's qualify their case to be heard by the district court because they're competent and knowledgeable. The district court turns down all 15 of them. All of a sudden, all 15 of those now qualify. Maybe one of our boys fouls up and only 14 qualify, but they qualify then to go on to the appeals court. Uh-oh, our boys are pretty sharp. The appeals court can't just summarily dismiss those. Our boys qualify those 14 for our state Supreme Court. So whatever the level is, at our state Supreme Court level, our boys now, because they've been up here to lesson 29, and now in lesson 30, they say, oh, here's Rule 54. All an appeal is a simple motion and brief. You know, when you get to the appeals process, friend, you've got all the work done. Here it is. All the work is done. All you got to do now is write one more brief and motion. That's all the paperwork I need to get to the district court. The district court turns me down. That's all the paper I need to get into the appellate court. And friend, that's all the paper I need now to get to the state Supreme Court. 3 more motions. What the hell's 3 more motions? The critical thing to remember now in these appeals, though, is this thing of the rules. Because, boy, they're going to come down. They want to get rid of you. But our boys are pretty sharp. Now, what would happen in Idaho if we had 15 citizens, that's one school, in each of the counties of Idaho? There's 44 counties, so let's multiply that out. We got 44 counties, and let's say we get, say 20. That's somewhere between 15 and 30. 440 pro se's twice, isn't that right? Yeah, that's 880. In the state of Idaho, if I could establish a school in each county of Idaho in the next year or 2, I would have 880 citizens out there who are competent. Of the 880 citizens who are competent, the statistics in Idaho show that every other person in Ada County, that's man, woman, and child, gets a traffic ticket. But 50% of us are not drivers. You know, I'm a man, I've got a wife. Statistically, 1 out of every 2 people, well, my gosh, I've got 5 children, there's 7 in my family. That means that my wife and I are entitled statistically to get 3.5 tickets, aren't we? You see the way our police powers are oppressing us? Now what happens if, let's just say, each of the 880 citizens gets 1 ticket? Statistically, they're going to get 2 or 3 if they're drivers. But let's just say they get 1. There's 880. Let's say 80 of them, because of one reason or another, won't qualify. We could have 800 appeals in front of our state Supreme Court. Let me tell you, friends, that long before there's 800 appeals sitting over there on McFadden's desk, that he's going to be on the telephone talking to the district court judges and the magistrate judges saying, fellas, it's time that you guys made some decisions down there in the courts and in the courtrooms. I don't want to be making decisions on Rule 5.2. I don't want to be making rinky-dink and Mickey Mouse decisions on counsel. It's time you guys grew up. Now that hasn't happened here, and of course lawyers don't bring up these kinds of issues. And it's time that citizens brought up their rights issues and brought them over here to the courts. The courts won't be swamped. This isn't a confrontation to drive the courts into oblivion or to overthrow the government. It's an assertion of the citizens' rights to be free from the police powers and its oppressive use by policemen who are using it improperly. It's an assertion of the right of the citizen to tell the tax collector, you collect it from the right guy, dummy, but don't come over here and try to collect tax from me because I don't owe it. And pretty soon the courts are going to have to send that message down the line and tell those tax collectors, troops, you're going to have to stop doing this. Now, if they won't stop doing that, here's where the ace of trump comes into play, and that's called the civil rights suit, the civil rights action. 880 citizens in the state of Idaho, out of a population of getting close to 1 million now. This state can't function with 800 appeals in a state Supreme Court. The thing that saves them now is that most people from the scene of the crime on will foul up in some way, and that case can be dismissed and it will not go to the state Supreme Court. It'll be fouled up. A person will give up because of the cost. He has to hire a lawyer to do it, and so it won't go on. That's the thing that saves them. But you can't deny a man his rights without suspending our Constitution, and we're not quite ready to do that yet, in my opinion. You give me 800 citizens in the state of Idaho, and we'll turn the state right side up, and we'll do it in 6 months or less. I don't need to write letters to to the editor of the Statesman. I don't need any letters to Steve Sims and the rest of the congressional delegation. If you people want gold and silver in the state of Idaho, let me tell you, friends, I just need 15 of you people, maybe 20 if I can get you, let's say 20 in every county in this state. And let me tell you, we'll have gold and silver in Idaho if the other 49 states have it or not. And that's fact. Redress of grievance comes on the courtroom floor. But it does require a certain amount of diligence and a certain amount of assertion and a certain amount of effort. I mean, it's a hell of a lot easier to sit here and write a letter to Steve Sims and say, well, I've done my part. I told Steve Sims to give us back our gold and silver, and if he doesn't do it, I'll vote for somebody else next time. And that's the extent of the involvement of the citizenry of America between 1900 and 1983. I hear a lot of rhetoric. I hear a lot of people writing letters like the John Birch Society, and God bless the John Birch Society. I'm not running anybody down. But they're out here busily writing letters, and they can sit here and write letters until the millennium is half over. And you're not going to get gold and silver. You people can write 50 letters a day until hell freezes over and you won't get gold and silver in Idaho. But you give me 800 citizens that are competent pro se litigants that'll walk in on the courtroom floor and say, troops, it's time we had gold and silver, and by God, we'll get gold and silver. Because if we don't get gold and silver, let me tell you, friends, the state of Idaho simply will stop functioning. It just can't function. You give me 800 people, my goodness, we've only got 800 prisoners out here in our state penitentiary. What are they going to do with the 800 alligators in our state? Are they going to put all 800 of us out here in the penitentiary? Pray tell, what are you going to do with the mass murderers out here? What are you going to do with the burglars and the rapists and the robbers and the pillagers and the criminals? You're beginning to see how much power a citizen wields on the courtroom floor. You know, one citizen with his appeal process overrode the governor of the state and the entirety of the legislature. I don't even know the guy's name. Remember? The guy up in Boundary County that said, wait a minute, you people are violating our state constitution and you're splitting our counties for political purposes, and he brought suit. Cost him $41. He walked in there and paid 41 phony Federal Reserve notes. He never even tendered lawful money, I'll bet you. And brought that case to the state Supreme Court. And right now, as my words are coming out of my mouth and onto this tape here in July of 1983, our legislature is going to have to change. They've been following a lawless procedure for 16 years, and one citizen by himself stopped them dead in their tracks. Can you begin to imagine what 800 people would do? I'm not talking about some mass movement out here. I'm telling all of you that are weak and faint-hearted and can't do this, get the hell out of my way. I don't even want you in the fight. All I need is about 20 people up there in Boise County, Idaho. Just, 4 or 5 housewives up in Idaho City and 5 or 6 mill workers over in Horseshoe Bend and a couple, 3 farmers up in Crouch, and watch what happens in your county seat when you people walk in on that courtroom floor with a traffic ticket and say, hold it right here, troops. I'm not going to plead to this charge. I'm not going to submit to tyranny. I demand all of my rights at law. I've set my case at the scene of the crime. And if you violate my rights, I'm going to bring a Title 42 action. Now, out of these 800, let's just say that 100 of these citizens are judgment-proof. That's 1/8. I would contend that the way our government in Idaho operates, that with 800 citizens, you can come up with 800 civil rights violations a year. But let's assume that we've only got 100. Do you think for a moment that the state of Idaho can withstand an onslaught of 100 $1 million lawsuits per year for as long as it takes? Just how long do you think it'll take our state legislature and our county prosecutors to wake up to the realization that $100 million a year out of 100, my God, we ought to win 4 or 5 a year by accident, for crying out loud. And if they had to spend $20,000 a copy on each one of these 100, how much is that? $2 million a year to argue these cases to Washington? And by golly, our issues are rights issues. Out of 100 of them, by statistics alone, we ought to get 100 of them qualified for the Supreme Court in Washington. What do you think the Supreme Court in Washington is going to do with 50 cases that come, say 100 cases that come to them a year? And it could be as many as 800. And the Supreme Court of the United States starts seeing all of this garbage coming out of Idaho to Washington. Don't you think they're going to take a few of those cases, if for no other reason, like the unjust judge, just simply say, look, we've had these guys out in Idaho are just driving us up the wall. We'd better take this driver's license case out of Idaho and at least tell them, no, go jump in the lake. At least we better tell them no, because they keep coming back and back and back, and they just won't give up. You see the sheer weight and the sheer cost. And then on the lawsuits, you've got this other double whammy that comes along from Little Abner, and that is the insurance underwriters just simply are not going to sit still for lawsuits totaling $100 million a year. The insurance rates and the insurance premiums on these county governments and these city governments in Idaho are going to come unglued. The boardrooms of Mutual of Omaha and Prudential and good old Sears in the Sears Tower are going to reverberate from coast to coast and border to border. There is just no way in the world that those insurance underwriters could withstand an onslaught of $100 million in lawsuits from citizens. Just isn't going to happen. And somewhere between here with 1 and there with 800, they're going to have to capitulate. They're going to have to sit down with you, my friend, up there in Grangeville, Idaho, or Tensed, Idaho, or some little burg out there in Oregon, wherever it is you live, and they're going to have to sit down in a local restaurant over coffee and sue for peace. And the bottom line of it is, when you get out here on the appeal picture, which is when you get out to here, here's where the fun starts. Between lesson 1 and 29, friend, it was all work. When I get out here to lesson 30 and I start on the appeals, I finally get and I say, now I've arrived. Now for a change, it's time for me to bloody your nose and to black your eyes. It's time now for you to spend a little more. $7,000 for a 65 Chevy just ain't enough. I want you to go over to Jesse Walters here, and I want you to explain your theft to him. And if Jesse doesn't want to hear it, then I want you to take it to McFadden. And if McFadden doesn't want to hear it, let's go to San Francisco. And let's you people bill that insurance company your $100 an hour for every hour that it's going to take you to answer all the briefs and motions that we're going to be filing now with these district courts, appeals courts, state supreme courts, the Circuit Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court of the United States. Now let me, in the closing minutes, give you my final sales pitch. We've completed 30 lessons. And I don't contend that in 30 lessons that you're going to be competent with F. Lee Bailey. But I'll tell you this, I've told you the essentials of what I know. And I told you in lesson 1 that when you got to lesson 30, you'd say, well, is that all there is to it? That's right, it's about all there is to it. It doesn't require millions of people, but the few people that it does require have to be the kind of hard-nosed, dedicated people that can go to jail and stay there for whatever it takes. I've got to have John Lilborns. I've got to have Rick Mitchells. I've got to have Claude Potts. We've got to have the kind of people that have the resolve and the dedication that when the issue comes up, by God, we're going to get an answer to that issue if it takes from now until the millennium to get it. I don't know if it's going to come this year or next year or 5 years from now, but if it takes somewhere between now and 5 years from now, we're going to get gold and silver in Idaho. Now, you can just make up your minds to that, and you can do it sooner or later. You can spend a lot of money in the process. I've showed you here in this lesson. These boys could have came to me, and they even probably for less than $3,000. If the guy would have driven my car home, washed it, pumped up the tires, and filled the gas tank, I probably would have taken my car back. At this moment in time, the dummies have spent $7,000, And I think before it's all through, they're going to spend somewhere in the neighborhood of about $25,000. And friend, I'm telling you, that's the most expensive 1965 Chevrolet that the insurance underwriters have ever bought in Ada County. And let me tell you, friends, I'm not going to tell you how many, but there's a lot more of them. And you know they stopped stealing our cars here in Ada County. Although they did steal a pickup the other day, the Highway Patrol hasn't learned what Boise City's learned, so I think we'll just teach the state of Idaho the same lesson we taught Boise City. That's going to be the most expensive 1963 Ford pickup you ever stole, Idaho. And Attorney General Jim Jones, they're going to sit down with one of us one of these days over at Elmer's Coffee Shop, and we're going to talk about it. And you're either going to talk to us over there, and you can lock George Gordon up in that penitentiary for the rest of his life. And if you don't want to talk to me, by God, you're going to talk to somebody else. Because before we're through, there'll be 800 of us. And there just simply isn't enough money, Mr. Jones, for you to continually oppress us and impose this tyranny upon us. You just don't have enough money. And I don't need any political movement. I just need 300 good left-handed men. And I've already got that many. And I'm going to get a whole lot more. And for those of you that are out there in Illinois, I know some of you have told me that Illinois is a police state that makes Idaho look like utopia. You will not get the benefits of this pro se procedure in your courts for about a year. They're going to lock you up in jail. They're going to beat you and scourge you. They're going to ridicule you and make fun of you. And it requires diligence and hard work. It requires sacrifice. For those of us that are going to do it from day to day, week to week, month to month, it's going to require evidence, facts, figures, times, dates, places, so that you can nail it down for that Title 42 suit. When that policeman stops you on the road, mister, what's your name? Why are you doing this? What's your probable cause? Right down the line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And he'll get angry with you and he'll lock you up in jail. And when you're in jail, Mr. Jailer, what's your name? What's your address? What's your rank? And why are you doing this? And pretty soon, you'll begin to get to a place where when you walk into that courtroom, they'll be saying, oh, it's Mr. Gordon again. They'll hate your guts, but they'll sure respect you for what you're doing. And they'll all sit back because, you know, these people are timid. They flee when none pursue. The cowardice that is being displayed in our county by our police is embarrassing, to say the least. I'm absolutely embarrassed. I don't think we could fight a war with El Salvador and win if they had 300 righteous men down there. It requires 100 of these guys around here to arrest one criminal, at least up in North Dakota it does. It takes 5 Boise policemen to arrest a housewife from Cuna, for crying out loud. And I contend that if we're dealing with cowards like that, there isn't even a contest. And that's why I'm kind of into the fight. But I'm not saying for a moment that a handful of those cowards are not going to haul some of you off and throw you into prisons and dungeons. After all, they did that to Paul and Peter and Titus and killed Christ and we've got some modern day contemporaries, what do? Don't they lock up people like Alexander Solzhenitsyn? If the guy writes a book and speaks out and tells people the truth about what he sees, it's a threat to the tyrants that are in control and power, and they sit there and they always overreact with more repression and more tyranny. It's been that way from time immemorial. These fellas, as an example, as we close here, instead of coming down with repression and tyranny, all they had to do is apologize and give me back my car. Wouldn't that have made a whole lot more sense than spending $7,000 for a 1965 Chevrolet? And they haven't even got started yet. But they will come down with more and more repression. And you can always predict their behavior because of their historical past. But there comes a point in time when somebody puts the brakes on them. And they put the brakes on them when their superiors say, wait a minute, if you dummies over there in that court can't handle these issues, then we're not going to nominate and suggest you for promotion to the next level up. And so that kind of peer pressure comes down on them in the same way it comes down on us. Now, at this moment in time, as we complete this lesson We have 19 schools nationwide. There's 5,036 counties in this country. We need 5,036 schools. And with 5,036 schools with 20 citizens in each county, we can turn the United States around. And you know, when there was a fellow named Melchizedek came to Abraham one day, he said, I'm walking down the road. And Abraham was concerned, said, where are you going? Oh, I'm going over to Sodom and Gomorrah. Oh, what are you going to do over there? Oh, I'm going to bring fire and brimstone down, kill everybody. Gosh, that's pretty serious, isn't it, God? What if there were 100 righteous people over there? Well, if there was 100 righteous people over there, I'd spare the place for the sake of 100 righteous. Oh. Well, gosh, what if they were short 10? What if there's only 90 righteous? Well, probably for 90 righteous, yeah, I'd probably save it for that. I probably wouldn't destroy it. Abraham worked him on down till he got to 10. And this fellow Melchizedek, who was Jesus Christ, I think, at the time. Anyway, he was an angel or God, and it depends on your your religious viewpoint here. Anyway, one thing you got to admit, he was a pretty powerful fellow. He said, I'm going over here and wipe out 2 towns, and so no matter who he was, he had a lot of power. Got down to 10 guys, and he said, yeah, you show me 10 righteous men over there, and I'll probably save that place for the sake of the 10 righteous that you show me in Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, there's 230 million Americans in this country. 230 million of us. And I'm sitting here saying, well, I think I need about 800 here in Idaho. 800. Let's suppose there's 900. There's 900,000 people. There's 1% of the people in this state of the caliber of people that we need to turn things around. I don't know. I don't know of 800. Let's go find out if we've got that many. That's what I'm suggesting for those of us here in the state. We need 20 people in every county that's got a county seat and a courthouse. 20 citizens that'll walk into the courtroom day after day, week after week, month after month, assert their rights and let the judges know that there are differences between corporations and individuals, and there's a few individuals left out here. That no matter how rotten the rest of the country is, there's a few of us over here that have some standards and values and demands, and that we want our rights. Maybe it's only 5% of us, I don't know. It's my understanding that during the Revolutionary War, only about 5% of the people were really active in supporting that revolution. Let's see if we've got 5% of the people here, maybe even less. Now, you do that in Illinois, you do that in Michigan, you do that in New Hampshire and Connecticut and Texas and wherever you are. 20 people in some of those obscure counties will do more than turn that place right side up. In fact, there are some counties that are so sparsely populated they couldn't afford a lawsuit of $1 million. Their entire budget in Boise County, Idaho is only $500,000. Some of you people out there in Chicago, you talk about $500,000. The budget in Chicago, I think, is in the billions of dollars. We have a county with a courthouse in Idaho with a total budget of $500,000, and they're bankrupt. They can't even raise $500,000 to keep the roads graded. What's going to happen when just one citizen walks over there and sues the sheriff or some deputy for $1 million for a civil rights violation? Just one! What are they going to do? Can you imagine the kind of impact that 15 citizens in that county would have? Well, you'd have a hard time getting people to run for the city councils and for the commissioners' jobs over there. It doesn't require thousands upon thousands and millions upon millions and mass movements and demonstrations. As I said in Lesson 29, you give me 3,000 people around Lawrence Radiation Lab that were competent pro se's. I don't know if this is good or bad. I think we could shut Lawrence Radiation Lab down with 3,000. We'd bankrupt those guys. And I don't need 3,000. I just need a few hundred. Just a few hundred good men to chase these Amalekites right out of our land, and to straighten the government back to where it was, let's say about 1900. It might have had some problems in 1900. We might have had some rights problems and constitutional violations. But one thing I'll guarantee you, we didn't have anywhere near the kind of repression and regulation that we've got today, and that the root cause of it starts with the failure of the substance of our common law with HJR 192 in 1933, when we in effect declared bankruptcy and repudiated our debts, devalued the gold, and stayed on the silver standard until 1965, and then in 1965 totally repudiated the entirety of the substance of the common law. You know, we didn't have these kind of regulations in 1900, and it was only made possible when we left the civil law and went into admiralty. And these illegal, unlawful jurisdictions that have been imposed upon us by these alien and foreign jurisdictions, these alien bankers, banksters as I call them, is something that can be returned to the normalcy, and I'm going to use the Constitution and call that normalcy of the Constitution. And there may be millions of people that sit there and scream and yell and rant and rave and want their food stamps and one thing and another. I don't care. They can have their food stamps. The people can go around over here with transfer payments as long as they want. Those that want to volunteer into the equity can just have at it, and they can take and share, and they can practice communism and do whatever they want. So long as those of us that are free men and free persons over here on this side of the ledger are left alone. That's all I really care about. And you know, Joe Sixpack out there is always going to be Joe Sixpack, and as long as he's got his six-pack and his TV and he's happy as a clam and he's got a job, I don't think you're ever going to stir him to any action. He doesn't need it, doesn't want it, isn't concerned about it, doesn't care. But there are literally millions of people out there that care about their freedom. There's literally millions of people. We know there's 22 million people, according to the conference board, that don't file 1040 forms every year. Now, I don't know what all of their motives are, but I'll tell you this much. One of their motives is sheer greed. They don't want to pay the income tax, do they? And of those 22 million people, I'll doubt if more than 2 million of them really owe the tax. The other 20 million are just ignorant. They just think they owe the tax. I don't think they want to participate in transfer payments. And for those people that do want to, let them do it. Who cares? For those of you that want to be slaves, you want credit cards, you want bank accounts, you want equity, you want a driver's license, there isn't any reason why you people can't have that, and there is great provision and great latitude in our Constitution to provide for that. There isn't any reason why any group can't go out here and form a commune and become communist and socialist and do whatever they want. They've done that in Antelope, Oregon. There's a group over there forming their own little town, and they've got their own little world, and they've got their own little constitution and rules and regulations and laws, and those people can live in whatever repression, filth, depravity that they want to. I don't care. And I'm not saying they're bad, wicked, terrible, and awful. I'm just saying if they want to do that, they can just chuck our Constitution. They don't need that, and they can go over there and live in any kind of dictatorial repression they want. And there's plenty of room for that. But of those 40 citizens over there, if those 40 citizens in Antelope, Oregon knew and understood their rights, they could demand and claim their rights and live side by side by those 5,000 religious nuts, as they call them, without any problems at all. Those 40 citizens over there on the courtroom floor outnumber those 5,000 chanting Joe Sixpacks. That's right. And if any of you people over there in Oregon see this tape, let me tell you, you 40 people over there in Antelope, Oregon, have those guys outnumbered by about 20 to 1 if you only knew and understood it. Gideon went out with 300 guys and killed 120,000, and I'm not sitting here talking about violence and running out here and killing all these people. I'm just sitting here saying the Constitution and the laws of the United States are such that you 40 citizens in Antelope, Oregon outnumber all the rest of those people over there 20 to 1. You just need to know how to go out there and defeat those Anakims. Well, in conclusion then, now that we've covered, I think, just about all of the basics, you've covered the trial and the appeal and covered the scene of the crime and your status, I think that now you have the equivalent of an 8th grade education. You know, you're just about ready now to go out into the world, and as we call Lesson 31, here it comes, friend, here's the real world. Now that you've completed 30 lessons, it's ready now for bear bait. It's ready, you're ready, it's time now. If you don't have a ticket, go out and get one. You need to get into a traffic court for some reason. If you don't want to give your driver's license up, then go in and argue the merits of the case. Go in and pick a jury. Get out and do something, and in about 5 cases, when a citizen has done about 5 traffic cases or 5 misdemeanors, he's now a pretty competent fellow. Then you'll be ready to start filing lawsuits. And so with this much background and this much basics, you should be able to research case law. You should be able to go talk to Laura the librarian. You should be able to write a motion and a brief and file an affidavit and write an affidavit. I think you now, if I'm going to characterize this, are about finished with the grammar school. Now, the high school of this kind of procedure, in my opinion, is when you go into the courts and you actually do 4 or 5 cases. Then I would say that's about where you've graduated from high school. Now you're ready for real life, and now you're ready to take on your government, and you're competent and qualified. And in addition to that, you can help others. And you know, it's one person helping the next guy, who helps the next guy, and pretty soon you'd be amazed. You've got a real potent force that you can use when you stake out your 9 square feet. I always stand up and I say, that 3 feet by 3 feet's mine, and this is where I'm going to defend George Gordon and his life, liberty, and property under the Constitution of the United States from here to the Supreme Court of the United States. And the rest of you better get the hell out of my road, because you're going to spend a lot of money messing with me. So friends, good luck and good hunting, and I wish you a great deal of interest. I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun at it. I've had nothing but a good time, and I've had nothing but fun for 5 years. You know, a few downs along with the ups. But those of us that have been doing this for a period of time recognize it as fun, and if you're not having fun in the courtroom, you're just not doing it right.